We never thought we'd win an award for anything. It was just like, well, there's a farmer down the street. Let's talk to him.
Our joke is I would be flogged in the streets if I decided not to do these virtual trips because they were so well received. I've been stopped in Costco and Famous Footwear, and I have been multiple times hugged from behind, and it's a kid who recognizes me from the video.
You want a kid to walk away and have that story that they can also go share and make that connection. You can't fake any of that stuff.
I always say this is the closest way of getting the kids to the farm without taking them there. And that's the bottom line.
There's a lot of work that goes into planning, setting up, and managing a live virtual event for large audiences. But it takes a unique blend of factors to rise above the noise of others doing the same to produce a trophy-worthy performance. Today we sit down with two of our wonderful partners who recently received national acclaim for their outstanding live virtual farm trips. Pop some champagne and get ready to take some notes as they share the secrets to their success on Shooting the Shift. Hello and welcome to Shooting the Shift, a venture here at Shiftology Communication where our team of communication professionals take time to reflect, share, and provide insights into what we do every day to help our clients reach more, convince more, and win more. I'm Dan Toland, Director of Virtual Experiences here at Shiftology, and we're happy you've tuned into today's episode titled Creating Trophy-Worthy Virtual Events. I'm excited to be joined today by two wonderful guests from our Virtual Farm Trips program. Let's start with some quick introductions. Can each of you share who you are, a little bit about your organizations, and why you decided that live virtual events were an avenue that you wanted to pursue?
I am Brooke Williams, the Director of Communications for the American Dairy Association, Indiana. I've been working for Indiana's dairy farmers for almost 11 years this August. Part of what we do working for dairy farmers is basically we're their promotion and marketing agency. And so very important to us, as you can imagine, all things dairy, wanting consumers to have dairy as part of their everyday diet. But more so than that, it's how do we really get those relationships started with people in the community, especially those that are K through 12, that a lot of the schools maybe right down the street from a dairy farm, but they've never actually been to a dairy farm. So really connecting people to the food, which is such an important thing that we're doing. The farm to table movement changed everything, I think, and so it makes our jobs a little more exciting that there's such an interest of where people's food comes from. And of course, we want, dairy to be one of those foods is highlighted each and every day. And so virtual farm tours made that happen in a way that we never realized was a possibility. And now it's something that I don't think we would continue going on into the future without adding virtual farm tours to our everyday outlook as we look toward the year.
Krista?
My name's Krista McCoon. I am the AgVenture coordinator here in San Joaquin County, and we are an ag and nutrition education program for the third graders in our county. So for us, we do in-person programming, and when the pandemic hit, it's hard to have an in-person field trip when there's no kids in school. And so I started looking into other avenues purely based out of necessity because there was clearly no way to have our field trip, and stumbled across some of the virtual farm trips that had been done in the past and called up Dan and had a very lengthy discussion about how could we make this possible. Our joke is I would be flogged in the streets if I decided not to do these virtual trips because they were so well received. Pandemic, necessity turns into pandemic silver lining for us.
You've recently won some awards for the virtual events that we put together. So I guess kind of personally, a little bit selfishly, I take a little bit of pride in the topics, the things that we're going to talk about today, because we all, played a key role in this. We've been working together for a few years. And I should mention the awards that you guys received are from the National Agri-Marketing Association, their Best of NAMA awards. They were first place national awards that must go through a regional judging and then go on a national competition. So we're going up against some of the best ag marketing programs out there across the country from all sorts of firms and groups as well. So again, I just want to congratulate both of you on putting together some trophy-worthy performances. Brooke, let's talk about the event that you guys received an award for, and Krista, you as well.
We won for a virtual farm tour that we did at a farm in Fountaintown, Indiana. Carrie Estes was the farmer, Estes Dairy Farm, and Carrie Estes just happened to be last year's Indy 500 milk person, which meant that Carrie was going to be the one in winner's circle. When the Indy 500 driver crossed the finish line, Carrie would be there to deliver ice cold milk. So when we started doing virtual farm tours, 2020, 2021, around that time, we realized that how cool of a story would it be if we got onto the dairy farm of the dairy farmer that was going to be at the Indy 500 that year. So Carrie wasn't the first Indy 500 milk presenter that we had focused on in the past few years, but Carrie was definitely one of the most energetic. All things aligned in our favor. The day that we were on his farm virtually, the weather was great. Carrie was able to get out and just had this beautiful moment where the cows just happened to be done milking and like walking out into the pasture. And it was just very picturesque. But again, to be able to tell not only Carrie's story as a dairy farmer, combined with his excitement to be going to the Indy 500 just a couple weeks later. And then you sprinkle on top of that, I believe we also had the 500 Festival princesses who were just, there as well. It was just, especially in the state of Indiana, Indy 500 is such a big thing. It's the reason why it's the greatest spectacle in racing. And so for us to be able to be on this farm with the 500 Festival, with, here's the farmer that's going to present the milk, I think there was an interest anyway. But again, it was kind of like all things leading up to that tour where we had been having a really good turnout on all of our virtual farm tours anyway. So to be able to tell this story in front of, 2,000 students potentially, even more so than that, I just think, it all just kind of worked out, and thankfully it did.
A bunch of nice things all came together. The excitement, the beautiful day, the cows literally running out onto the pasture, and we're going to show that on here when we do the podcast. If I recall correctly, Carrie gave like some of the best explanations that I've ever heard of the breakdown of all the feed components that you give to dairy cows and stuff like that. I think I even typed that to you guys while we were producing that, saying that was the absolute best thing I've ever heard. Krista, let's talk about yours. So from the dairy farm out to San Joaquin County.
Yeah, so our award was for a series of virtual farm trips, and specifically it was a blueberry and an apple farm that we went to in the spring and in the fall of 2023. And what's neat for us is we have about 70% specialty crops here in our county, and being able to highlight those for our students, young and old. While we do educate third graders, our virtual farm trips are open at any age, which we've heard wonderful feedback about. And being able to showcase a blueberry, which for many students is a commodity that they're familiar with, but seeing how that grows, how that's processed, that's something that's completely unfamiliar to them. And what makes our county unique is we have what's called the Delta. So we actually have a lot of water in San Joaquin County. And so there's a lot of farming, and these blueberries were out in the Delta. And so we have kids that, live in concrete jungle, and they have no clue that they're 30 minutes from water and blueberries. And so it's fun to be able to show them. Our farmer out at Victoria Islands, Farmer Jack, he's also a really interesting gentleman and has a really cool story how he left farming as his family practices is that you leave farming and then you ask to return. So he actually had a career in fashion first, asked to come back to the farm, and he has just has a lot of energy, is very succinct, and is able to kind of deliver a message that the kids can understand. So that's really neat. And his property, the blueberries, are right next to the processing. So we could literally pan and show the kids, this commodity is going 2 football fields away. That's it. And then we have apples, which we did in the fall, which all kids know what an apple is. And so it's neat for them to see the commodity, how it's grown, what a tree trellis looks like. I mean, again, they may pass these commodities the way to and from school or something like that, but hearing from the farmer how they're processed, the nutritional benefits, why they should consume them, all of that's really interesting. And then when you can show them the harvesting equipment that goes along with these, a lot of those kids are sold at the harvesting equipment.
You're a one-woman show, so you're recruiting people to help you out, going around on the farm doing things, but you will literally set up your laptop in a station on the farm and then helping everybody get set up. You'll run back and forth. So we'll have her out there. She'll be out on a gourd farm or whatever, pumpkin bales and pumpkins all around her. She'll be like literally in the orchard, like sitting there, just getting into it and getting kids involved. Get up, take your stretch breaks, and start moving around and stuff. So the energy of Krista is greatly appreciated through all your tours. Let's go back to when you first started doing this, both of you. Obviously, your goal wasn't to win awards. I mean, that was a nice thing to happen, but What were you looking to accomplish, and what would you have considered a success just when first starting out?
For us, honestly, it was trying to reach more students, more kids. We had a program at the time, Fuel Up to Play 60, which was a national initiative from the National Dairy Council and the NFL, and we were able to get into some schools with that program. But it took the right teacher, right, that would invite us in. Well, as soon as we started offering virtual farm tours, it was just simple. It was so much more simple to say to a teacher, "We don't need to come and like actually be in your class. You can add us into your curriculum and whatever you're doing that day, and let us introduce you to a dairy farmer and see where the kids' food is coming from." And so I think it just took a bit of a shift for us to really open more doors. And you guys still help with all of the communication, right, of how we get in touch with these schools, and using your network to really reach more people and communicate and do all of the work that we don't have to do is huge. We're a small staff of only 8 people. So being able to kind of pitch these ideas or say, "Hey, we have a farm, we'd like to do another virtual farm tour, and you guys take it from there." I mean, it's huge. Shiftology has become part of our team and executing this. It's like every quarter we're bugging you to do something, and then what else can we do? We saw such success just from the very beginning. I remember when we got the list of who all had registered, and it was like, we have how many classrooms signed up to see this? It changes everything. We don't have to have one of our 8 employees out on a road doing a road tour just to knock on a door of a teacher to say, "Please let us in." Now these teachers are coming to us. And as Krista mentioned, you get people from, not just your targeted group anymore. We're reaching students from all across the country. And I mean, that's huge for dairy farmers, not only in Indiana, but in the country, to be able to share their story. And now here we are all these years later. And, yeah, we never thought we'd win an award for anything. It was just like, well, there's a farmer down the street. Let's talk to him. So,
For us in setting up the virtual tours, I was trying to replace minute for minute an in-person program. So I was sitting here saying, okay, well, if this is going to take, this part out of the program, how many minutes do I have left for our virtual farm tour? And what is that going to look like? And so I called up a family that we've known forever, and I said, "Can you do a virtual farm tour?" And he said, "Virtual stupid." And I said, "Okay, would you please for me do the virtual farm tour?" And he said yes. And at the end of that, the value that we saw, I mean, same thing that Brooke, just to echo what she's saying, we weren't planning on this being part of our bread and butter, if you will. After we saw the success, we saw it as an opportunity to make our program more of a program. So right now, our in-person program is 2 hours, one shot per school year for the third graders. So adding these virtual trips, the success for us really comes in allowing it to be a part of an actual program where we have more points of contact with our students and are constantly getting more students. Word of mouth is great. And we're getting kids from across the country. We have people watching our old videos from, other countries. And so seeing that continued success and that continued blossoming of interest has been huge. And so that's, for us, the success came out of, this is really a way to make this part of a program opposed to a one-stop touch for our students.
So it's not so much a novelty as much as being completely integrated into what you're doing. I heard that. I think that's a theme I heard from both of you now. You're saying, Brooke, you're saying, I can't imagine going forward without this being a part of our programming. And Chris is saying, this help us really build our programming. So it sounds like the virtual stuff isn't going away, and I have job security for a little while, which I'm happy about. What did you find to be most difficult, and what are the improvements that you've made over time to the programming?
So we represent the entire state of Indiana, and we want to feature dairy farms from all over the state, ideally. But the problem is, it's kind of a twofold, right? You have to find a farmer who's willing to get on camera and speak with enthusiasm that's going to hold the attention of kids. And you also need to find a farm that hopefully has a cell tower within reach, where if we're making this effort, the connection's there. I think those are probably the two biggest hurdles, honestly, is just pinpointing the farmers. And we know we have some farmers that raise their hand every time of like, "Please come back. I'm happy to do another tour." But we really want to show not just one farmer story. We have almost 700 farms in the state of Indiana. And while we know we can't ever feature all 700, or else, Dan, you really would have great job security, we're looking for those that have unique stories to be told, that also, we go up there, and whether it's snowing, raining, whatever the weather may be, that we're able to have that great connection, not just with cell service, but also between the farmer and the kids, and being able to really speak to the terminology that's going to make sense, to be able to show the feed and what the cows are eating, and have the kids so intrigued and interested to ask those questions, because we want it to be fun for the farmer too. We love the questions that come from third graders' mouths, and they're questions that are more entertaining than anything I could ever ask. So really, I think it's just for us, it's the constant hurdle of where is that next farm? Can we make that happen? Is the weather going to cooperate, and go from there?
We share some of those same hurdles here in our county, finding farmers that are willing to do it and speak in a way that third graders can understand. Rural internet is sometimes not our friend. The one thing I have found is most teachers, especially at this point, they're pretty understanding when things don't go exactly right. I mean, very few Zooms for whatever purpose go exactly right. I think for us, one of the struggles that we had in the very beginning, setting up the first tour, was because we're unique in that we are catering to our county, although now we've cast a wider net. Every single one of our school districts in our county has different permissions and different ways that things have to be set up, and trying to get all of those unique qualifiers and boxes checked that would allow our content to actually go to the students, opposed to being blocked, was trying to figure out that correct formula for a good couple of trips was pretty difficult. I think we've now kind of found a way to use the multiple platforms in a way that all of our students are able to see that. The other hurdle we found, again, because we were trying to match a program we did, was finding the right length of time, because we started ours at an hour and 15 minutes because we were trying to match time that they had elsewhere. That was way too long. I mean, it's hard to sit for an hour and 15 minutes as an adult. And so kind of slowly over time trimming that down to where we feel like the feedback we're getting is good, the farmer isn't being asked too much because they're all busy, has been really helpful. And it's a lot easier for them to talk for 30 minutes or feel confident in talking for 30 minutes than it is like, hey, can you hold your own for an hour and 15?
Chris, I think maybe your hurdles is just helping your dad get the gimbal figured out. I remember you, Dad, do this, Dad, no, Dad.
My poor dad. So
you recruited everybody.
AgVenture really is a staff of one. I'm the only staff person. And so trying to get my dad to be able to control the gimbal and get it to work. And poor guy has really bad thumbs. So like holding that for an hour and a half was torturous for him. And so yeah, that was rough. I do have a different videographer now, so that is good that their thumbs are a little bit more functional. But that first trip, I was actually at my house recording it, and they were at the farm. And I said, never again. I never want to be so far away that I don't feel like I can help, like Dan said. I mean, I've had to run across the road and run back a couple of times because something didn't go right before, but you just make it work.
If you have to build a checklist of things you need to do to set yourself up for success, what you need to make sure is on your checklist as you're planning this.
Thankfully, we offer media training to so many of these farmers. So we kind of have a list every spring going into like, I bet that person would do a virtual farm tour. So finding the farm, finding the farmer, and then really allowing us to be on their farm for an hour of time. Our tours are typically around that like 30 to 40 minute mark, but just having to have them step away from their daily duties to do this, or for an hour of time even, sometimes can feel overwhelming. So we kind of let them just continue on, and then we quickly grab them when we're ready to log in and just throw a headset on them and be like, all right, you're on. And our team's really good too about giving the farmers prompts when they're there to make sure that we're, sticking to the timeline and, going from a freestall barn into a milking parlor back out to the calves or whatever it may be. So I think, the dairy farm, finding a farmer, and then just kind of giving them the confidence to kind of go forward and talk about what they do every day.
Yeah, I think that rehearsal piece for us in our program is super important. We actually accompany all of our virtual farm trips with a worksheet. And so they're fillable PDFs that if you follow along, you can answer. They're not complicated. We repeat the answers multiple times. So having that rehearsal and having a successful rehearsal is how I get the information for those worksheets, which helps keep us on track for like the live event. Are we covering what we need to cover? It helps keep the farmer on track, and there's some very specific things that they know that they need to hit. But it also allows me to say, oh, hey, I need some B-roll or some footage of that. So I think that rehearsal piece really sets our program up for success because I feel
Hmm.
very well prepared. I've yet to find a farmer that hasn't said, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Which for me, that's a win.
Hmm.
If they're like, it wasn't as bad as
Yeah.
I thought, we're good to go. Because most of the time, they're fine to do it again and they understand the value and they believe in it. They just are afraid of the headset and the technology and the, oh, I touched it and now I can't hear anything. Or does this
Yeah.
microphone thing move? Or, that's the stuff that's nerve wracking to them. Or just the
Hmm.
FOMO of like having their phone shut off and in their car. Like, Brooke, it's very nerve wracking because they feel like they can't be contacted. But then when they're done or they get feedback from their community members who said, I saw you this morning or my son saw you on YouTube. That's so cool. Thank you for doing that. They're so much more willing to do that. And I think the rehearsal really helps them feel prepared. And when our students register in our classes, we actually ask them for questions that they hope we cover. So in that
Hmm.
rehearsal, I throw out some of those silly questions that I know that you're going to get asked. How big is your pumpkin? I know. They're going to ask you how many cherries are on your tree. And the farmer's like, I don't know. They're like, do you really want me to count? I'm like, no, you don't have to count. Just come up with like an educated guess. But giving them that week-long buffer and that rehearsal really helps to move past some of those things. But I know I can still
Hmm.
ask my audiences questions because that's part of what we're doing is what do they want to know and let's get them the answer. So I think one of the things that sets us up for success is making sure that we have that rehearsal scheduled far enough out that we can create a worksheet for the teachers. I can get whatever B-roll I need to add in, and the farmers feel really good about what they're doing after that.
What are the keys to a highly successful live production? So we've done all the rehearsing, all the practicing, all the prepping as much as we can. What are we doing live that is making this as successful as possible?
I think the thing that I personally have learned as the one that's always moderating the farm tours is like nobody wants the awkward silence, right?
Mhm.
Like, there has to be this gap where you're transitioning, or you can tell a farmer is like trying to think about how to best phrase whatever the messages they're getting across. And what is the question that I either need to ask, or how can I fill in this gap of what information we're wanting to pass on? So I feel like every time we do a virtual farm tour, I'm learning something new, just working with the different personality of a farmer, or covering new material. Or Dan, you mentioned kind of having the prompts of what you want to show. We do a lot because some of these farms are in rural areas. We have the videos that we have to play, and so how do we make sure that this is all just going smoothly? And I do think it's so important to keep the energy up as we're going through these farm tours. And I probably now more so than I did at the beginning, I love having the farmers answer the questions because I feel like it breaks the ice so much. If we have a farmer that I can tell that early on is nervous about doing this farm tour, they just can't get comfortable with the headset. I mean, you ask a farmer, how much does a cow weigh, or do you have a favorite cow, or what do you love about dairy farming? It immediately they stop thinking and overthinking about all this stuff that they were nervous about doing. It just kind of pulls them into that moment of, I can talk about this because this is what I do. So I don't know if there's one big, we have to do this every time to make it a success. I think it's just really being okay with being flexible and figuring out, what's working best for us, but more so for the dairy farmer's farm and for the farmer that we're trying to really put a spotlight on.
Being a very mindful moderator and being inside the head of the farmer or the person who's being featured to be able to bring out the best in them. So that's
Hmm.
key, and you do a great job with that. So is Krista. Go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, I agree. I think knowing your talent and whether their comfort level is at a 10 or a 2, I always tell them we're going to make this a volley. I'm going to ask you a question, you're going to respond, and then it's going to come back to me, and it's going to go back and forth, and we're going to play this game. And I said, and in between, I'm going to ask you some questions from the kids. And then usually at that point, they're okay. And for them, once they get rolling at 30 to 40-minute time is not enough because they want to keep telling you this is their livelihood. This is what they love. They get so comfortable, you have to kind of rein them back in. But I think from like an actual logistical standpoint, I like to kind of keep track. I open a Word document and I keep track of what questions the kids are asking. I like to copy and paste those into Word. And we do, if we have time, we do rapid fire questions at the end, which our farmers usually love because they can really quickly answer whatever question that is. Just keeping them going and on track and being able to transition to the next component is helpful, especially if we're splicing in videos. Our very first one, we had scheduled the walnut tour, and they told me about 10 days before the trip that the tour wasn't actually going to be going. They were done for this season. So I went out and pre-recorded that whole piece because I didn't know that it was going to be shut down, and they didn't understand that we wanted it going. So I went out and pre-recorded that whole segment. Like literally half of our virtual tour was not filmed that day, but no one is any wiser because we just pre-recorded it, put it in. I said, wear something that looks similar to what you had on in the video, and moved on. So I think making those transitions as smooth as possible, where maybe they're not as aware that that's not happening live, is also an important part of my job as a moderator, and just being a smiling face. If something doesn't go right or it's blurry, we're moving on. It'll be fine.
Just think back through all the trips and tours that you've done. What are some of the moments that stand out as some of your favorites?
I always try and ask at some point throughout the tour, like, why are you a dairy farmer? I feel like that's always the question that like we will get the most genuine response. I just feel like they get a different look on their face and just like get a moment to reflect about like, why am I doing this still? The virtual farm tour that I really do look forward to doing now is the May virtual farm tour, just because it's always fun for us to invite people onto a dairy farm, and now we can, right, all these classrooms. But when we get to mix in other partnerships into a virtual farm tour, and we get to talk about, the race and the Indy 500, and we get to have these princesses that they're college students in the state of Indiana, and most of them have never been on a farm, let alone a dairy farm. And this one day they get to be there, and we get to have them ask questions live to a farmer. It's one of those farm tours that every May, I think all of us look forward to, like, how did that one go? Just because it's so unique. Some of the questions from the kids, they crack me up. If I ask some of these odd questions that come out of the mouths of like a 10-year-old, it would be weird, but I can be like, hey, this kid over in, whatever city wants to know, like, does chocolate milk come from a brown cow, or, do cows really sleep on sand? I mean, it's the way that kids' minds work. And I think for dairy farmers, they don't get asked those questions every day either. And so it's kind of fun to see their minds kind of blown by some of the creativity as well.
Some of the most unique, interesting, memorable things happen, maybe not necessarily on point or on message with what we're doing. Sometimes it's an off the wall question. Sometimes it's something that just serendipitously happens. Like Brooke, I remember we did a tour where you invited the Indianapolis Colts kicker to be on the tour. And at the end of the tour, they're like, hey, we want to show you something. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep this rolling to see what happens and keep recording it. And so, like, I think it was Carrie Estes, his sons, is like showing him, he's got the whole routine figured out. He's putting down the ball. He's going to kick it over top of the barn like a field goal. And he's doing the entire kicker's routine. And so and the kicker's just loving it. He's like, oh my gosh, he's doing the whole thing. So, and that whole family was so engaging and fun and wonderful. And then there's things like on Krista's end, one time she's like, my computer was at 90%. Now it's at 2. What's going on? Like on the back end, she's like losing it, going, oh, my computer's going to die. What's happening? So it's those type of things that
was not fun.
Maybe sometimes people don't see, So it's crazy. But Krista, what's the most memorable type of moments for you? Unique, memorable moments?
Well, definitely my computer almost dying on a live trip. That was not a good experience. That was actually just in April. We had done the rehearsal. My computer was fine. It was 100% charged when I got there. And then it went from that to like 40. I'm like, I'm not going to make it. So Dan's like, well, you have 6 minutes, go sit in your car and charge it. So I'm in there, headset, my computer's charging. My farmer then can't hear anything. He had hit the button. So I go over, fix that, get out of my car. And I'm messaging Dan,
chaotic. Yeah.
I have 2%. Like, this is not going to end well. And so I'm like, as fast as I can get our closing spiel out of my mouth, I do. But so that was a very unique experience because that's never happened. I think some of the fun part for me is just featuring something different. So in one of our pumpkin tours, we actually had, this was when my dad was doing the gimbal, the farmer and my dad got in the car and showed the students just how close the field is to the processor. So during this, like what was like a 3 to 5 minute drive, we didn't leave the airtime dead. We asked questions so they were able to banter, but the farmer is like selfie style talking to the kids. And he's like, you can see him get out of the car. And so we were able to explain to the audience, like just how close the product is to the processing and, the short turnaround time. So we were able to use this, what would have just been dead air, for our benefit. And then the kids could like truly see and feel like how close that distance is. Um, I have the unique benefit because of the way our programming is that I see a lot of these kids at our AgVenture events in person. I have been multiple times hugged from behind and I have no clue what's happening. And it's a kid who recognizes me from the video. Our last event, 4 or 5 classes wanted to take a picture with me, and it's this celebrity moment that really is about the farmer and not me. But I try to explain to our farmers, if we can exert our influence and we can be the influencers, like what a great message. So seeing their expressions and how happy they are when they're seeing in real life, in the flesh, these farmers that were on their big screen at school, that messaging really resonates with them, and they're much more likely to soak in that information and put it to use. And so I think that that's really cool. I mean, I've been stopped in Costco and Famous Footwear, and it's teachers who are literally regurgitating the information. And so it's just really cool to see that people are actually, we have tens of thousands of kids watching these videos, and it's really cool for them to see you in real life and just kind of get that experience. And our farmers have shared the same, so it's cool for them too.
Think about that. That rings true, because we live in an era where the YouTuber is more popular than the primetime TV show, because nobody is watching that, So it's all about these kids subscribing to things, what kids are watching on YouTube, these live experiences, and that's why we don't go out and like shoot these in 4K and edit the crap out of them, because this is what's real. And that's what people trust. And so for you to say kids are recognizing me and they're running up hugging me, that's exactly the type of thing we're talking about, why these things can be so influential and why they can be so effective with kids in schools. That leads right into my next point about the feedback, not just from the audience, but from those that you have to answer to. Board members, funders, farmers, what kind of feedback are you receiving from this?
When you talk about the feedback and you talk about the schools and the classrooms that continue to want to participate, I mean, that's kind of that like return on investment over and over again that we weren't getting necessarily, in a non-conventional way. Like, we could go and make the school visits, but for a classroom or a teacher to want to continue to sign up again and again for a farm tour and continue to learn about dairy and use us as a resource to help tell that story and make that impression with the student in their classroom. I think that's huge. That's the stuff that for our board members, especially when, it's somebody is stopping our board members to say, hey, we saw a farmer in this community today on the virtual farm tour. I didn't know you were doing a virtual farm tour, or a classroom watched you this week. Or, I think those are the moments too, that it's, for them, they don't even realize the impact that they're making until somebody recognizes them, at wherever it is in their community. And it's always fun, post-event to see like why they joined, and if the message of dairy got across to them, and, will they be joining again? And just kind of all of those touch points that are helping us do our jobs better. But I mean, more importantly, telling the story of dairy farming again in a way that we didn't even know was possible 5 years ago.
I actually just got done with a grant presentation that helps fund some of these trips, and she said, seeing how far your program has come and the fact that you didn't give up on ag education when we had this whole block of the pandemic and figuring out what to do, and you could have just stopped, but persevering. And I mean, I brought what I call the crazy idea of virtual farm trips, because I had only seen like 2 to my committee, and I said, I think we can do this. And one of my committee members in particular, she was very skeptical, and just the impact. And she, we still believe that teaching the kids in person is vital and important. And I said, but find me a farmer that's willing to let 14,000 kids on his cherry orchard, because I've got oceanfront property in Arizona. Not going to happen. I said, but I can educate that many kids in one virtual trip. And then that lives on in perpetuity online and just continues to snowball. And so they've really, my committee, my boss, my board of supervisors have all really seen the benefit of utilizing this as a tool in our toolbox and as part of a more complete program to educate kids. And I think, Brooke, you mentioned seeing those re-registered classes. It's super cool for us, because I actually have a huge spreadsheet of all the virtual trips that we've ever done, and every registrant and every email. And to see those classes that have for, 3 years now done 3 virtual trips a year, and they just keep coming back for more. they want the content and we're happy to provide it to them.
Yeah, we have over 26,000 teachers over the time that I've been doing this that are on our list to say, yes, we sign up for these things, we go to multiple tours, please send us more updates. So I have over 26,000 teachers nationwide that we send updates to. And it's amazing. They keep coming back year after year after year. I'll get emails starting in about this time of year. Hey, when are you going to start doing these trips again? They'll be there. Don't worry. It's so unique because there's a bunch of fancy things out there, but there's just something about just a simple live virtual event that keeps people coming back for more. Whereas these other type of things, you don't have that. Every year, it's the same teacher. It might be the same darn farmer we're meeting with, but they're like, I want my kids to be there live because they don't get that anywhere else. I mean, do you hear that?
We could send classrooms videos day in, day out. But the one thing that we realized even before doing virtual farm tours is we can't show, dairy farm footage from Colorado, right? Because here in Indiana, we don't have the beautiful Rocky Mountains. We can't fake it. Like we have to have the farmer that when it's snowing outside and we're in the middle of winter, that farmer's bundled up and not, we can't show a video from somebody in Arizona that has these like beautiful skies when they know that it's a storm going through and, they want to see it from the farmer. They want to have that moment where they can type in a question and I'm asking the farmer within minutes that kid's question. I mean, all of those little things just make a big difference and they make learning more fun. Like a kid's not going to go home and be like, Mrs. Smith showed us another video today about a dairy farm down the street. I mean, this way they can go home and be like, we saw a calf on, the farm that's 50 minutes away from us today. And I got to ask the farmer a question. It makes such a big impression. And you want a kid to walk away and have that story that they can also go share and make that connection to why agriculture is important and why we keep doing what we're doing and why all these farmers are doing what they're doing and can't fake any of that stuff.
I always say this is the closest way of getting the kids to the farm without taking them there. And that's the bottom line.
Put you on the spot. If you could narrow things down, what are the absolute top tips, must-have things for those who are planning virtual events to give them the best chance to succeed?
I think just having like a list of the equipment that you needed, but also just trying it. I mean, what's the worst that happened? I mean, that was kind of the way I looked at it was I'm just going to have enough fake confidence in myself and I'm going to fake it until I make it. And I'm going to breathe a huge sigh of relief when this is done. But you can do it, whether it's, 100 registrants or 1,000, it doesn't matter. I mean, our goal is ag education. And once you get a few of the simple tools and once I explain what a gimbal is, my farmer's like, well, really, I said, it's one person on a gimbal and I'm sitting at my table and it's not scary. And we're going to have the confidence to do it because this is going to be worth it. So I think a little bit of fake confidence and the right equipment and a farmer who's willing to try it with you is really all it takes. And you can do it too.
With Krista, it's, what does it hurt, right? Just try a virtual farm tour, see what happens. Everybody has a story to be told. And this is really one of the most creative, effective ways to tell the story. And I think anybody would be surprised at how many people are interested in hearing it.
It's just been wonderful working with you all and all the other groups that we work with because we all learn something every day doing this that we can pass along to share and help. And you mentioned this big group, you have this huge reach. Krista, yeah, you're trying to reach third graders in San Joaquin County, but if you have students from Indiana coming and joining your tours, or Brooke, you have students from California coming and joining your tour, we're all doing a better job. Not just what we're being paid to do, but what we're passionate about, educating and helping open people's eyes and making sure this next generation of consumers understands how that food gets from the farm to their plates. That being said, how can our audience learn more about your organizations, find your trips, all that good stuff?
Whether you want to learn about Indiana dairy farms or just dairy farming in general, winnersdrinkmilk.com.
And for San Joaquin County AgVenture, which we have a variety of specialty crops grown here in our county, it is sjcagventure.com.
It was a great conversation and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And that's it for another episode of Shooting the Shift. You can learn more about today's guests at winnersdrinkmilk.com and sjcagventure.com. We're proud to partner in hosting virtual farm trips and a wide variety of other virtual experiences with folks like Krista, Brooke, and many others across the country. check out our work at virtualfarmtrips.com, where you can also get in direct contact with me to learn more about how we can help turn your virtual event idea into a trophy-worthy experience. On behalf of the entire gang here at Shiftology, I'm Dan Toland saying thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Shooting the Shift.